Remember when Canadian winters meant scratchy wool snowsuits and gathering around the TV for hockey night in Canada with the whole neighborhood? Before weather apps and electric heat, we battled the elements with pure Canadian grit and turned frozen months into cultural touchstones that shaped who we are. What forgotten winter rituals from the 1960s defined our national character and still live in the memories of those who experienced them? Coming in at number 8 on our countdown of winter experiences that defined 1960s Canada, we find ourselves wrapped in the steam rising from mugs that warmed Canadian hands during those brutal winter months. Picture this: temperatures plummeting to 40 below, snow piled higher than your waist, and the satisfying ritual of thawing frozen fingers around a mug of something that promised warmth from the inside out. This wasn't today's quick fix instant cocoa, this was real hot chocolate, often made from scratch, following recipes passed down through generations. Mom would slowly melt Baker's chocolate squares into warm milk, stirring constantly while adding just the right amount of sugar. The rich aroma would fill the kitchen, drawing family members from all corners of the house like a siren call. For adults, there was always the telltale bottle of Canadian Club or Yukon Jack nearby, ready to transform an innocent hot drink into what folks called a proper warmer. Nobody questioned this ritual, it was simply what Canadians did when winter showed its teeth. Number 7 brings us to the sacred snow day ritual, a moment of pure childhood ecstasy that united young Canadians from coast to coast. Before the era of instant notifications, Canadian kids mastered the art of the early morning radio vigil, huddled around kitchen radio still warm from Dad's morning news broadcast. The tension was palpable as announcers methodically worked through alphabetical lists of school closures. When your school's name finally crackled through those tinny speakers, the reaction was electric. A spontaneous celebration that launched a precisely choreographed day of winter freedom. Within minutes, phones would ring throughout neighborhoods as kids coordinated the day's adventures. Mothers across the country performed the identical ritual of layering children in wool. Scratchy, uncomfortable, but non-negotiable. "You'll thank me when you're not frostbitten" became the national maternal mantra. Then came the exodus, front doors slamming as children scattered into winter wonderlands, returning only when hunger or frostbite threatened, their snowsuits crusted with ice, cheeks painted crimson by wind and exertion, and spirits soaring with the unique joy that only Canadian children truly understood. Number 6. On our journey through 1960s Canadian winters celebrates the Winter Road Warriors, those everyday heroes who navigated treacherous conditions with a combination of ingenuity, stubborn determination, and distinctly Canadian practicality. This was motoring before front-wheel drive became standard, before sophisticated snow tires and electronic traction control. The Canadian driver's winter preparation was nothing short of ritualistic. Heavy steel snow tires, studded, were installed during the first November cold snap. Cars transformed into survival pods, their trunks weighted with sandbags for better traction, and packed with emergency kits containing candles for heat, matches, blankets, and often a small flask of whiskey for medicinal purposes only. Most telling was the unspoken code of winter driving ethics. No Canadian would ever drive past a stranded motorist. When cars became stuck in snowdrifts, people appeared from nowhere to push. No questions asked, no thanks. It was simply what being Canadian meant during those long winter months. "My father would have sooner walked 10 miles in a blizzard than pass someone needing help," recalled one woman from Manitoba. Winter wasn't just weather. It was the great equalizer that reminded us we were all in this together. At number 5, we encounter the battle against the chill, the domestic front of Canada's Winter War. Central heating in the 1960s was far from the set-and-forget luxury we enjoy today. Many Canadian homes still relied on oil furnaces or wood-burning stoves that demanded constant attention. The morning ritual began before dawn, when the designated family member, almost always Dad, would descend into the frigid basement to coax warmth from temperamental furnaces. Upstairs, families engaged in elaborate winterizing traditions. Windows disappeared behind layers of plastic sheeting, meticulously attached with tape and then heat shrunk using hair dryers in a bizarre indoor ceremony that marked the official arrival of winter. Draft dodgers, not the Vietnam War variety but long tubes filled with sand, guarded the bottoms of doors. Most iconic were the sleeping arrangements. Electric blankets existed but were luxury items for most. Instead, Canadian beds disappeared under layers of heavy wool. Hudson's Bay blankets, their distinctive multicolored stripes, visible in bedrooms across the nation. Children learned to sleep perfectly still, as any movement might create a momentary gap where frigid air could ambush warm bodies in the middle of the night. Number 4 takes us to the heart of how 1960s Canadians transformed winter from adversary to ally through communities that have since faded or fundamentally changed. Winter festivals weren't the polished tourist attractions we see today. They were authentic expressions of community resilience and creativity born from necessity. In small towns across the country, ice sculpture competitions were judged with Olympic seriousness, often featuring elaborate creations carved with handsaws and chisels rather than today's professional-grade tools. The sculptures told Canadian stories: hockey players in mid-slap shot, voyageurs paddling canoes, or mythical creatures from indigenous legends, all glittering under strings of colorful bulbs that transformed main streets into magical wonderlands. Community halls hosted winter dances where generations mixed on wooden floors worn smooth by decades of celebration. These carefully choreographed events, but authentic gatherings where teenagers in snow-dampened formal wear navigated social hierarchies while parents chatted over Crown Royal and styrofoam cups. Winter was when you really knew who your community was, remembered one woman from Timmins. When the temperature dropped to 30 below and roads disappeared under, you celebrated with whoever could make it to the hall, and those became your winter family. These festivals have largely vanished as communities grew, television expanded, and entertainment became something consumed rather than created. The magic of those gatherings, their authentic character and necessity, has been replaced by commercial spectacles that mimic the form, but miss all of what made these winter celebrations central to Canadian identity. At number 3, we honor the Ice Fishing Brotherhood, a cultural institute that connected generations of Canadian men in a ritual of hardship, patience, and unspoken emotional bonds. In the 1960s, this wasn't simply recreation but a legitimate food source for many families, particularly in rural areas. The technology was beautifully primitive. Hand augers that required real strength to cut through 2 feet of lake ice, canvas tents instead of insulated huts, and wooden tip-ups that signaled a catch with simple mechanical elegance. The sensory experience was distinctive and unforgettable. The peculiar silence of snow-covered lakes broken only by the occasional crack of shifting ice. The smell of wool mittens dried over small portable stoves. And the unique taste of whiskey sipped from a thermos cap that somehow tasted different. Better on the ice, Most significant was the social dimension that has largely vanished. With my father and uncles, words were rationed like expensive imports, recalled one man from Northern Ontario. But somehow, sitting on upturned buckets staring at holes in the ice, conversations emerged that couldn't happen anywhere else. These were spaces where Canadian men, often emotionally constrained by the era's expectations, found permission to share stories, wisdom, and occasionally feelings, all under the convenient cover of just fishing. Today's ice fishing, with its sonar fish finders, portable heaters, and satellite television, preserves the activity but has lost much of the cultural weight that made it a defining Canadian experience. Number 2 brings us to the winter fashion statements that transformed Canadians into distinctive winter creatures, recognizable anywhere in the world. The 1960s Canadian approached winter clothing not as fashion but as armor against a formidable enemy, creating an aesthetic that defined us internationally. Most iconic was the Hudson's Bay Point blanket coat, with its distinctive stripes originally designed to indicate trading value, but eventually becoming a symbol of Canadian winter identity. These wool coats were heavy, almost comically so by today's standards, but their effectiveness against prairie winds and maritime gales was unquestioned. Children disappeared into snowsuits so thick they waddled rather than walked, arms extended permanently outward like tiny, colorful astronauts exploring an Arctic planet. The sensory experience was unforgettable. The scratchy wool against necks, the distinctive smell of wet mittens drying on radiators, and the peculiar sound of snow pants rubbing together with each step. But most beloved were the hand-knit items that connected generations. Toques and mittens created by mothers and grandmothers, following patterns passed down through families. These weren't just garments, but expressions of love and protection against Canadian winters, often featuring distinctive patterns, maple leaves, beavers, or simplified hockey players that were unmistakably Canadian. My grandmother could knit a toque without even looking at her hands, remembered one man from Saskatchewan. She'd be watching hockey night in Canada while her fingers worked independently, creating protection against a cold she understood better than any meteorologist. And finally, our number one winter experience behind 1960s Canadian culture. The Saturday night hockey ritual that united a nation across vast geographical divides. In an era before entertainment options multiplied like snowflakes, Hockey Night in Canada wasn't merely a broadcast. It was a secular national ceremony that punctuated winter weeks with clockwork precision. The sensory memories remain vivid for those who experienced it. The distinctive theme music that caused a Pavlovian response in Canadians, the smell of special snacks prepared exclusively for hockey nights, and the particular quality of light from black and white televisions, reflecting off excited faces in darkened living rooms. Families gathered not just to watch a game, but to participate in a shared national experience. The voices of Foster Hewitt in English Canada and René Lecavalier in Quebec became the soundtrack of winter Saturday nights. Their distinctive calls, "He shoots, he scores," etched into the collective memory. Unlike today's highly commercialized NHL with international superstars, 1960s hockey featured players who seemed cut from recognizable Canadian cloth. They had summer jobs because hockey salaries weren't enough to live on year-round. They played through injuries without complaint. They were, in many ways, idealized versions of ordinary Canadian men facing winter challenges with grace, skill, and occasional necessary violence. When Canadians of a certain age speak about losing something essential in our national character, this shared winter ritual sits at the heart of that nostalgia. As one elderly gentleman from Winnipeg put it, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. We didn't just watch hockey, we watched ourselves, our values, our way of facing long odds and harsh conditions. Those Saturday nights weren't about entertainment, they were about remembering who we were. In today's fragmented media landscape, no cultural experience unites Canadians with the same power and significance that Hockey Night in Canada did during those long-ago winters when the nation paused, gathered, and recognized itself in the game played on gleaming indoor ice while winter raged outside.